So let's talk about Friedrich Nietzsche. You've probably heard of him. He's often described as the philosopher who took a hammer to Western civilization. But here's the thing that often gets missed: what he tried to build from the rubble. And that's exactly what we're going to explore.
It really all starts with this line. It's his most famous and maybe his most misunderstood statement. Now, you might think this sounds like some kind of victory cry, right? But for Nietzsche, it was the complete opposite. It was a warning, the diagnosis of a huge cultural crisis that he spent the rest of his life trying to figure out.
So what on earth did he actually mean by the death of God? And maybe more importantly, what happens to us, to a whole society, when its God dies? Let's dig in and unpack the philosophical toolkit he built to help us navigate that new world.
Okay, first things first, a world without God. It's so important to get this right. When Nietzsche said God is dead, he wasn't trying to win a debate about religion. He was making an observation about our culture.
Think about it like this. For centuries, pretty much everything in the West, our sense of right and wrong, our purpose in life, our laws, it was all built on this single foundation, a belief in God. But Nietzsche looked around and saw that through science and new ways of thinking, that foundation had just eroded. It was crumbling away, and the entire structure of our values was suddenly floating on nothing.
And when that foundation disappears, well, that leads us right into what Nietzsche saw as the single greatest danger facing humanity, the abyss of nihilism.
So what is nihilism? Well, if there's no God to give life meaning and no divine rulebook to tell us what's good or evil, then what's the point of anything? That feeling, that chilling realization that maybe it's all for nothing, that is nihilism. It's a profound sense of meaninglessness and despair.
And this is where it gets really personal. Nietzsche believed that we humans can put up with almost any amount of suffering as long as we believe there's a reason for it. But suffering for no reason at all, that, he argued, is the absolute horror of nihilism, a state that is just unbearable. So how do we climb out of this abyss? Well, Nietzsche knew you couldn't just invent new values out of thin air. First, he had to perform a philosophical demolition job on the old ones. And he started by asking a really fundamental question. Where did our ideas of good and evil come from in the first place? And his investigation led him to a pretty radical conclusion. There's no such thing as a single universal morality. Instead, he identified two completely different moral systems born from two totally different psychological states. Let's break this down. On one side, you have master morality. This is born from the powerful, the noble, the strong. They look at their own traits, strength, ambition, pride, and they just say, yep, that's good. It's a total act of self-affirmation. But slave morality is a complete flip. It's a reaction from the oppressed. They look up at their masters and, out of resentment, they declare that everything the masters are, that is evil.
And the psychological engine that drives this whole thing is what Nietzsche called ressentiment. It's this simmering, bottled-up resentment. It's really the secret weapon of the weak. Since they can't get revenge in the real world, they do it in their imagination, by flipping the entire moral code on its head. It's an imaginative revenge. And for Nietzsche, Christianity was the ultimate expression of this, making virtues out of meekness and pity.
Okay, so if the old morality is a dead end, what's the new engine for creating value? For Nietzsche, the answer was a force that he believed drives every single thing in the entire universe.
This is the will to power, and it's so important to understand this isn't about crude domination or political power. It's much deeper. It's the inherent drive in all of life to overcome obstacles, to grow stronger, to master itself, and to express its unique force in the world.
He argued it's even stronger than the will to live. I mean, people will risk their lives all the time for more power, for growth. You see it everywhere. An artist creating a masterpiece, a philosopher creating new ideas, even the slave inverting morality. All of these are expressions of this fundamental drive to exert influence and shape reality.
This all brings us to the ultimate goal of Nietzsche's philosophy, a new type of human who can actually thrive in a world without God. And to test this ideal, he created a really powerful thought experiment.
This ideal is the Übermensch, or Overman. And let's be absolutely clear, this is not a master race. That's a horrible distortion that came much later. For Nietzsche, the Übermensch is a spiritual goal. It's an individual who has overcome nihilism by creating their own values, embracing this earthly life, and achieving total self-mastery.
To become this Overman, Nietzsche said the human spirit has to go through three transformations. First, you are the camel, dutifully carrying the heavy burdens of tradition. Then you become the lion, destroying those old values to win your freedom. But freedom isn't enough. Finally, you have to become the child, a symbol of a new beginning, playfully and innocently creating your very own world of meaning.
The Overman is the polar opposite of what Nietzsche was terrified modern society would produce, the last man. The last man just wants comfort and security. He takes no risks, has no great passions, and just wants to be cozy. It represents the kind of comfortable, living death, the ultimate dead end for humanity. This all leads to Nietzsche's ultimate test, the eternal recurrence. So imagine this. A demon whispers to you that this exact life you are living, with every mistake, every heartbreak, every moment of joy, you will live it again and again forever. How would you react? With horror or with joy?
Your answer reveals everything. The Overman is the one who hears this and shouts for joy. This is Amor Fati, the love of one's fate. It's the power to look at your entire life, the good and the bad, and say, yes, I would change nothing. It was all necessary for me to become who I am. This is the highest possible affirmation of life.
But this profound philosophy of individual self-creation has a dark shadow. After Nietzsche's death, his ideas were tragically twisted. Let's take a look at how that happened.
The Nazi Party co-opted Nietzsche's language for their own horrific ends. His concept of the Übermensch, a spiritual goal for an individual, was twisted into a racial category. The will to power, his idea of psychological self-overcoming, was distorted to justify brutal military conquest. It was a complete and utter perversion of his philosophy.
So how did this happen? Well, after a final, brilliant burst of creativity, Nietzsche suffered a complete mental collapse. He spent the last decade of his life unable to work. And during this time, his sister Elisabeth, a fervent German nationalist, took control of his unpublished notes. She edited, rearranged, and distorted them to fit her own political agenda.
And that leaves us right here. Nietzsche's challenge echoes down to us today. He asks us to achieve Amor Fati, to love our fate so completely that we would gladly live it again forever. In our own world, a world still grappling with the death of God, his question remains as urgent as ever. Is the creation and affirmation of our own meaning the only true way to live?